Venezuela set for Sunday's parliamentary elections as voting materials arrive at polling stations. More countries reimpose strict measures as COVID-19 cases surge. And Ghana's political foes signed peace pact ahead of Monday's general elections. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. Venezuela's National Electoral Council has begun the process of installing the voting machines that will be used in this Sunday's parliamentary elections. The personnel accredited as polling station staff have begun receiving and distributing the materials that will be used during the vote. Meanwhile, the officially accredited international delegations have also established their protocols in order to observe the process and ensure its transparency. Venezuela uses electronic voting machines, with the system considered to be one of the most secure in the world. On Friday, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez participated in the conference hosted by the Samuel Robinson Institute entitled Crisis and Challenges of Democracy in the Multipolar Era. During her remarks, the Vice President said her country's challenge in the face of imperialist attacks is not only to promote democracy, but to guarantee the rights of the Venezuelan people.
If you ask me, there is a crisis, and the real challenge is to build a democratic model that serves humanity, that serves citizens. We are only 2 days away, but what will happen on December 6 is not just any election. It comes in a context in which the exercise of sovereignty by the government of Venezuela becomes an expression of emancipation in the face of the powers who want to subjugate the people of Venezuela.
Well, authorities from Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago held a high-level meeting on Friday to discuss joint maritime security and the protection of human rights. The video conference was headed by Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Ariaza and Minister of the Interior, Justice and Peace, Carmen Melendez, while the neighboring Republic of Trinidad and Tobago was represented by Foreign Minister Dr. Amory Brown and National Security Minister Stuart Young. The meeting addressed coordinated efforts to combat smuggling, human and drug trafficking, and organized crime. The meeting was the second held this year after the last on September 4th, which proposed a collaborative approach to mitigate irregular migration, as Venezuelans have left the country in the face of the huge economic impacts of the unilateral coercive measures imposed by the United States. Over to Chile, survivors and relatives of the victims of the Augusto Pinochet era protested on Friday to reignite calls for justice. The demonstrators gathered in front of the judicial headquarters to demand justice for their relatives, tortured and killed during the Pinochet dictatorship under Operation Colombo. Protesters rejected the ruling of the Criminal Court of Santiago that acquitted 60 former secret police agents convicted of kidnappings and murders. Social and human rights organizations have rejected the court's decision.
That is why we are here today, because the appeals court, in a shameful ruling, benefiting 31 torturers and murderers, people who tortured pregnant women, like the journalist Diana Aron, people who were beaten to death, such as Mar Tugarte, who have been left off the hook. They are being cleansed of their guilt in Punta Ceupa. We believe this is a terrible sign that shows the commitment of the courts of the judiciary today to persecute social activists.
In other news, armed violence against social activists and human rights defenders continues in Colombia, with news of the death of another indigenous community leader killed on Thursday. According to a statement from the Institute for Development and Peace Studies, Miguel Tapi Rito, an indigenous governor in the Rio Valle community in the department of Choco, was forcibly abducted by several armed men who slit his throat in a nearby field. The latest assassination has become a modus operandi that is repeated every week in different parts of the country, where community leaders, activists, trade unionists, human rights defenders, and former guerrilla fighters live in constant fear. The latest killing brings the total registered in this region of the country so far this year to 16, while the number across the country stands at 278. In the midst of the political crisis that Guatemala has experienced in recent weeks, President Alejandro Giammattei and his Vice President Guillermo Castillo seem to have put an end to their differences. In a joint press conference, the two announced their government's plan for the year 2021. President Giammattei also requested the resignation of all government ministers as he evaluates the formation of a new cabinet. The request for resignations forms part of the usual political process in Guatemala at the end of every year. We have more stories coming up. Don't go away. Welcome back. The World Health Organization has expressed concern over the perception that the COVID-19 pandemic is over and stressed that the rollout of vaccines will not by itself eliminate the virus or the crisis it has triggered.
Progress on vaccines gives us all a lift, and we can now start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, WHO is concerned that there is a growing perception that the pandemic is over. The truth is that at present, many places are witnessing very high transmission of the virus.
We've also got to drive demand and convince people and continue to convince people that this vaccine is a safe and efficacious way out. I have seen vaccines transform the world and change the course of epidemics, and I fully expect that these vaccines and the ones that are to come will do that. Please let us all be careful with our words on this matters. This matters. People being vaccinated matters going forward. They need to get the right information. We don't want people's health to be affected by a poisonous debate around this. We want a positive, engaged, informative debate on this issue.
On Friday, a new act came into force in Italy, which includes restrictive measures that seek to tackle the COVID-19 epidemic. The resolution, signed by Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, sees restrictions on citizens' mobility within the country during the Christmas and New Year holidays. Health authorities have reported a surge in new infections, with over 24,000 new cases reported in 24 hours, as well as over 800, taking the death toll to over 58,000. Authorities have stressed that unless strict measures are adopted, the country could face a third wave after the holidays. The Portuguese president extended the national state of emergency for a further fortnight on Friday, although he noted that the restrictions could be eased in time for Christmas. The current extension will run until December 23rd.
This perspective, to be specified by the government, will allow for everyone to know what to expect for such a significant time in the personal life of families and communities such as Christmas time. The same for the new year and beginning of 2021. The search for a less strict regime during Christmas, if confirmed, will be to allow for families to have their legitimate gatherings, avoiding at the same time to open the door to unmanageable control with a high cost 2 or 3 weeks later in January. The idea is not to risk the Christmas spirit, but without the concentration in one single moment and added respect for the rules that can avoid generalized family outbreaks.
More than 1,000 migrant children in U.S. government custody have tested positive for COVID-19 since March, according to the federal agency charged with their care. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, a federal agency run by the Department of Health and Human Services, confirmed 1,061 cases among unaccompanied children in its care, noting that 943 have recovered and been moved from medical isolation. The more than 100 children who remain in isolation have not required hospitalization. Staying in the U.S., President Donald Trump's campaign lost its bid to overturn the results of the Nevada election and stop the state's 6 Democratic presidential electors from voting for Joe Biden on Friday. In a 35-page ruling, Judge James Todd Russell said he saw no clear or convincing proof under any standard of evidence that he should declare Trump the winner in Nevada or to nullify the results of the statewide presidential vote. The judge acknowledged during a hearing on Thursday that the case was headed to the Nevada Supreme Court, where it is expected to get fast-track handling and a possible ruling before the Electoral College finalizes nationwide results in 10 days. We're taking one last break, but stay where you are. Welcome back. Bahrain has granted emergency authorization for the COVID-19 vaccine candidate developed by Pfizer and BioNTech on Friday. The country thus became the second in the world to approve use of the shot after the United Kingdom. The Media and Communication Directorate announced that the authorization followed thorough analysis and review of all available data. Last month, Bahrain granted emergency approval authorization to a vaccine candidate developed by the Chinese state-owned firm Sinopharm to be distributed to frontline workers. In other news, authorities in the besieged Gaza Strip have imposed a new set of measures to counter the spread of the coronavirus. Under the new measures, mosques, universities and schools will be closed until the end of the year, while shops and other business premises will only be allowed to operate between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. The densely populated territory under an Israeli blockade has in the past 2 weeks witnessed a sharp increase in the number of new COVID-19 infections.
There is no doubt that the issue of closure is a challenge, but in my personal opinion, the main focus is on citizens' awareness, no social gathering, wearing a mask, and maintaining personal hygiene. As for the issue of distributing the vaccine, yes, we are in urgent need of it, especially in conditions of closure.
The Iranian government has demanded a clear and unconditional statement from the International Atomic Energy Organization condemning the assassination of top nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. In a letter to the director of the organization, the representative of the Islamic Republic to international organizations in Vienna, Kazim Garibabadi, explained that the assassination of Fakhrizadeh is the continuation of terrorism and attacks against Iranian scientists in recent years. He further noted that such acts require attention from the world and related international organizations. Hundreds of doctors demonstrated in front of the Tunisian Ministry of Health on Friday to protest the death of a young surgeon due to an accident caused by a faulty elevator at the hospital where he worked. Surgeon Badruddin Aloui, aged 27, plunged to his death down an elevator shaft on Thursday after the lift doors opened but with no elevator in place, according to witnesses. The elevator in a hospital in the marginalized Jendouba region had allegedly remained in service despite a long reported fault. The protesters are demanding the dismissal of the health minister and other officials.
He was only 26 years old. He had his whole future ahead of him. Today, he and his family have been deprived of a bright future. Why? Because we live in a system that doesn't try to improve, that does not try to make things work, do not have too many problems. And in the end, we don't fix, we don't repair. In the end, the accident happens, and there are deaths. Today's movement was in protest following the death of our colleague, Badruddin Aloui, who was a general surgery resident at Jendouba Hospital. He was doing his internship during a shift. He was killed. He had a fatal accident following his use of a broken down elevator.
Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo, who is running for re-election this Monday, and his main opponent and former President John Dramani Mahama signed a symbolic peace pact in the capital on Friday, committing to use legal means in case of any electoral disputes following the vote.
We in the NPP want a credible election conducted in a peaceful and tranquil atmosphere. We're certain we have a track record that will make an end vote to renew our mandate, just as it was in 2016. We want this victory to be sweet and incontestable. I've said that we believe in elections, and I'm happy to give my word that we shall accept the verdict of the people of Ghana. Above all, the pledge of the people, the peace, unity, and safety of Ghana will be our primary concern.
As we end our campaigns tomorrow and prepare to vote on Monday, I pledge to ensure peace and preserve the stability of our dear nation, Ghana. Elections are about counting heads and not cutting heads, and so we'll work together towards peaceful elections. I urge the security agencies, voters, and all stakeholders to ensure law and order. We expect to see all security personnel behave professionally.
In India, agricultural workers continue to protest against the new legal framework that benefits big business. Rural workers from several states continue their mobilizations against 3 new agricultural laws, with rallies organized on the outskirts of the capital, New Delhi. Members of at least 35 agricultural organizations and government representatives are set to hold a new round of talks as the pressure mounts after more than a week of protests. The workers have stressed that the new laws will negatively impact the national market, and the end of state purchases of grain at a fixed price will leave them vulnerable to further exploitation by big corporations. On that note, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I am Doris Polo. Thanks so much for watching.